that we could lose. And the green flag went down, and I knew we were in a little bit of trouble, because in the Congo line it was Tony Longhurst, Dick Johnson, and Greg was in third place, although he was leading the race. In those days, it was a little bit of a strain on the Clark, of course's workload to get the right car in the right place to be where it was supposed to be.
He loves officials.
So I knew that Greg wasn't going to do anything stupid, but 3 guys from Brisbane, national television, he's not going to let them just run away. And when the flag went down, they all went up mountain straight like 3 cats in a row. And by the time we got to the top of the hill, he came on the radio and said the engine's just blown up. At which stage I did have a little bit of a bend in my knee. And I said, well, is it still running? He said, yes. Well, I said, well, get it back under, whatever you do, get it back. Rudy will know what to do with it. We just thought it was a loose spark plug wire or something like that. Turned out it was a cracked block. The temperatures had gone down 50% of where they'd been running. He's hit it with the hammer, which is what drivers are supposed to do. And the thermal shock, as Rudy, as a good salesman called it, put a crack in the block, and that was the end of the day. Was one of the funniest after-race get-togethers, because when the boss of ANZ sat down with a drink with all of us in the suite after the race, he said to Eggenberger, now tell me, Rudy, what would be the chances of that happening again? Oh, Mr. Bailey, 1,000,000 to 1. He said, well, I don't even actually like those odds, and we better have 2 cars for next year. And that's what you call a sponsor.
And those Sierras, they could dial in. Rudy was very good at dialing in some fairly significant horsepower. What sort of horsepower in qualifying trim did they run?
Just a little over 500.
So that's a bit lower than most people say. I understand they were able to produce a lot of horsepower for a very short period of time.
What you're listening to, ladies and gentlemen, is what you call a back of the pits rat, and he is the biggest one, sniffing around horsepower figures, and what's anybody doing about it? 500 horsepower. Can I go back to the fact it was good enough for a 3-lap lead before we screwed up?
So, of the small Fords, you obviously had a lot of success with the Sierras. They were your favourite small Ford?
Yes, of course.
The Cortina, you told me a story once about how when you first brought the Cortina back to Australia and the workshop that you eventually, ran all your cars out of, you basically prepared that out the back on the dirt floor and everything like that?
It was an old building on Malvern Road that was born in about 1904. It had been used as a taxi depot in the 30s, but the back half of the building was still an earth floor. And we started trying to be professional with white overalls for the mechanics, but after about 2.5 days, they all looked like they'd been race mechanics from Alabama. And we went back to Yaka and said, can we have some darker colored overalls? But eventually the old boy and his wife that owned the building said, Allan, we want to retire. We don't want to put it on the market. Can't be bothered with an auction. Would you like to buy it? And that was the best donation as an investment I've ever done, because I've been there all my working life.
And still the office there with all the trophies, of course. Just quickly, if Alan's okay, to anybody got any questions? Just a couple from the crowd.
Is that a state in Australia, is it? The worst day I had in South Australia was when the sergeant of police was waiting at the roundabout where you picked your bags up and said, I've got some bad news for you. I'm here to pick you up to take you up to where your truck has just burnt down. And this was the maiden voyage of our beautiful new, as it was in 1975, new international double-decker truck. which caught fire. The drivers, the team, the two fellows driving the truck didn't know. Somebody waved them down, eventually stopped them. They stopped right on the highway. They didn't even pull off the side of the road. And the thing burned to the ground, including the lovely Falcon that was in the back. And that was a sick day for me, I have to tell you. It looked, when I got there, that it turned nighttime, and it was just looked like a gigantic whale that had been attacked by 15,000 vultures, because the whole body was aluminum and it just melted. And the next year, what happened? I don't know. Oh, they borrowed my car. Yes, yeah. That was actually before that, so we've skipped that. You know. Howard Marsden rang me at 7:30 that morning and said, "Alan, I have some bad news for you. Your car has been stolen." I said, "Howard, I'm aware of the point structure in the championship. I'm G'd up enough. I don't need this as a pep talk. What are you bloody well talking about?" He said, "Your car has been stolen. And we are negotiating with Murray Carter and John Goss as to who would lend you a car so we can stay in the championship." And that was a nice gesture on those fellas. They both put their hand up. But they found the guys had taken the car and they dumped it in the Adelaide Hills, and the only thing they did was they pinched the carburetor off it. The car continued to race later in the year. Thank you for that nice memory. Yeah.
Any good memories?
Any stories about the Capri, Alan? The RS 3100.
Well, I was very proud to have it, and I thought that I was like in heaven with the true engineering. And the first time I drove it at Sandown, where I had dispensation to drive it as it arrived with the big tires on the back, but when it came to the point where I had to put the 10-inch wheels on it, and it became quite lethal and no way of fixing in a hurry, it was kind of a disappointment. But that didn't mean that it still wasn't a great car.
Still won a championship.
Well, sure, helped half a championship.
Yeah.
And Jim McEwen's loaning of the engine to go to the States.
Jim McEwen's loaned me an engine. Yes, we had to prove to. I was asked by Ford. How did this work? Alan Mann had run the Trans Am Championship in '66, and at the beginning of '67, the biggest threat to Cortina sales were all the wins that Alphas were getting, and the brass in Detroit said, "If you can show us that you can beat an Alpha at Daytona in February of '67, you can have the contract to run the team for the whole season." And I knew we couldn't do it with the BRM engines that we were racing, and talked Jim McEwen into lending me his engine, coming over and driving the spare car. And the funniest thing about that deal was that the Shell management advised Jim not to accept my offer because they thought all I was trying to do was pinch his engine and never return it. That was the feeling that was going on. But it didn't turn into a contract for me because while leading the race, the flywheel came off, which gave me a hell of a fright, I must say, the noise that made. And the Ford guy afterwards just graciously said, "Well, you know, you've proved the point. The car was fast, but it was unreliable, and we can't see our way clear to be bothered supporting you for '67." And that was a pretty low day in my career, I have to tell you. We've said enough. We want to give some trophies away.
Yes, we're almost ready for the trophies. I'm saying getting nods, getting shakes. Find another story. Okay, one more story. Let me think.
The story there was that we had to continue, and for any young fellows here that are out starting their working career, don't be afraid of a little bit of failure from time to time, because that's just the stepping stone to success. And by the end of, halfway through '67, I was driving a Cougar for Bud Moore Racing, and at the end of the year I was offered a job at Carcraft as their test driver. That was Ford Advanced Vehicles, where all the Trans Am Mustangs were being prepared. So what started out as a terrible disappointment, not getting an opportunity to run the whole team, I landed up working in the best university, motor racing university in the world.
You raced the Cortina all over the United States, not just that first year around Detroit.
And Canada.
Of course, and Canada. North America, let's call it. Any fond memories from some of the American racetracks?
Yes. Went to a place called Nelson Ledges in Pennsylvania, and because that was that area that I was part of my area, but there was also a police sergeant from Detroit that had a Lotus Cortina, and we battled for the front row in qualifying, and went back to the Holiday Inn that night. Came back the next morning, and we see the cops' Cortina in the Parc Fermé. And I've said to the boys, look at that bloody Henderson bastard. He's trying to psych us out, parking himself in the winner's circle before the goddamn race has started. Wrong. The race had been started and won by him. We hadn't moved our watches forward for daylight saving. One can be forgiven for minor details like that. As team manager, I have to say, that was life. So I was so mad at myself that the second race, there was 3 races for the weekend, off we went, and the first corner was a fast right-hander, and I thought, well, I'm going through this corner first. I don't care what kind of a start he got. And he got a pretty good start. And I landed up in the trees because I overshot the corner. I was so bloody inflamed with my stupid mistakes. So any other funny stories you want? Oh, I got one for you. I got one more. Are we getting there back here? This is the last one. This is a place close to David's heart, Danville, Virginia. Again, Trans Am race, and one of the drivers in another Cortina was the late great Paul Hawkins. And we're staying at a Holiday Inn again, as you do when you're in America traveling. And this was a 3-story Holiday Inn. And I'm lying in bed, minding my own business like good race drivers should do the night before a race. And all of a sudden, there's a bang on the door, and I jump up, get him out. And Paul Hawkins comes running into the room and said, "Quick, quick! I've been here with you all night." Jumps into the other bed. He didn't jump into bed with me. He jumped into the other bed. And I said, "What the hell?" I said, "Not now, not now." Next minute, knock on the door, police. "What have you guys been doing tonight?" "Oh, just watching Hawaii 5-0 or something like that." And Paul hardly opened his mouth. They went left. And I said, "What the hell's going on?" He said, "Well, you know, we're upstairs from you. They dropped a bunger." Everybody familiar with a bunger? A fair-sized firecracker that will go off in water. And they dropped one down the toilet in the 3rd floor, and it went off down on the ground floor while another, shall we say, client of the motel was sitting somewhere, who got a little bit peed off with this, got onto the management, and they're still looking for the guys that did it. It wasn't me, it was Paul Hawkins. I've had enough of this now.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Alan, for being our guest today. We appreciate you coming along and